Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today's story is wild. Get ready for some epic revenge. The concrete mixer's growl masked Gordon Tully's breathing as he crouched behind the rusted caterpillar, phone pressed to his ear. Through the chain link fence, he watched his wife's Honda pull into the yoga studio parking lot 2 hours before her class was supposed to start. "You recording this, Uncle Frank?" Gordon whispered. "Every second, kid." "Keep that phone steady." Jade stepped out, straightening her designer leggings. She moved like she owned the world, that familiar arrogance that used to make Gordon's chest swell with pride. Now it made his jaw clench. She knocked on the studio's back door, 3 quick raps, then 2 slow ones. A code. The door opened. Asher Stone emerged, all flowing hair and fake tan, his arms immediately wrapping around Jade's waist. Gordon's thumb found the zoom button just as Asher's mouth crashed against his wife's. "He's just a placeholder," Jade's voice carried across the empty lot as they broke apart. "A walking ATM machine who builds pretty driveways." Gordon's grip tightened on the phone. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of coming home with concrete dust in his hair, proud of the foundation he was building for their future. Placeholder. "Got enough?" Frank's gravelly voice crackled through the earpiece. "Not even close." Gordon had always been good at reading blueprints, but he'd missed the warning signs in his own house. The distance that started 6 months ago. Jade's sudden interest in spiritual wellness, her new wardrobe that cost more than his monthly salary, the way she flinched when he touched her shoulder. He'd convinced himself it was a phase, midlife crisis. Empty nest syndrome, even though they'd never had kids. Jade always said children would complicate her energy. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday. Gordon came home early from the Meadowbrook subdivision project, concrete burns still stinging his forearms. Jade was on the phone in the kitchen, voice low and breathless. "I can't wait much longer, baby." He's starting to notice things. She'd claimed it was her sister having marriage problems. But Jade's sister lived in Phoenix and went by Rebecca, not Baby. That night, Gordon started paying attention. Really paying attention. The yoga receipts buried in her purse. $300 monthly memberships to 3 different studios. Deleted text threads that left gaps in her message history. New lingerie tags in the bathroom trash, still attached to price stickers that made his eyes water. The cement of suspicion began to harden in his chest. "You're working late again?" Jade asked one Thursday, not looking up from her phone as Gordon grabbed his thermos. "Martinez wants the foundation poured before the inspection." Gordon watched her face. No reaction, no concern, no interest. "I've got late classes tonight." "Don't wait up." Instead of heading to the site, Gordon drove to Uncle Frank's duplex in Parma Heights. Frank Kowalski had spent 30 years working Cleveland PD before his knees gave out. Now he lived on disability and cheap bourbon, but his cop instincts stayed sharp. "She's cheating," Gordon said without preamble, settling into Frank's threadbare recliner. Frank muted the Browns game. "You sure?" "Gut feeling." "Gut feelings don't hold up in divorce court, kid. You need evidence." Frank pulled out a battered notebook, the kind he used to carry on patrol. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." They talked until midnight. Frank scribbled notes, asked pointed questions, helped Gordon see patterns he'd missed. By the time Gordon left, they had a plan. "First rule of investigation," Frank said, walking him to the door. "Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Stay cold. Stay smart." "What if I find what I think I'm going to find?" Frank's weathered face hardened. "Then you make sure she never sees it coming." The next morning, Gordon installed a GPS tracker on Jade's Honda. Nothing fancy, just a magnetic box he ordered online and stuck under her rear bumper while she showered. He felt dirty doing it, but the feeling passed. 3 days of tracking revealed a pattern. Jade visited the Zone yoga studio every day, sometimes twice, but according to their schedule, she only taught there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Gordon started bringing his lunch to the construction site across from the studio. Through binoculars, he watched Jade arrive at 11 a.m. sharp, use her key to enter through the back, and stay until 1 p.m., always alone going in, never alone coming out. That's when he called Frank about the surveillance. "You ready for this?" Frank asked, handing Gordon a burner phone with a high-quality camera. "Been ready for 20 years, just didn't know it." The footage was devastating. Jade and Asher tangled together on the studio's meditation mats. Jade riding him while wearing Gordon's anniversary necklace. Asher bending her over the reception desk, her wedding ring catching the light as she gripped the edge. But it was the conversation afterward that really gutted him. "When are you going to leave him?" Asher asked, pulling on his designer sweatpants. "Soon. I just need to make sure the house transfer goes through first." Gordon's blood froze. House transfer? "Your lawyer friend set that up perfect," Jade continued, checking her makeup in the mirror. "Forging his signature was easier than I thought." Men are so trusting when you stroke their ego. "How much did we get it for?" 200,000 below market. Your LLC looks legit as hell." Asher laughed. 20 years in real estate fraud, baby. "I know how to make paper trails disappear." Gordon stopped recording. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped the phone. They weren't just having an affair. They were stealing his house. Gordon's first instinct was to storm into the studio and beat Asher's face into pulp. Instead, he drove to Ben Morrison's law office in downtown Cleveland. Ben had been his friend since high school, back when they both thought they'd work construction together forever. Ben chose law school. Gordon chose concrete and steel. Jesus Christ, Gordon. Ben's face went pale as he reviewed the documents. "She forged your signature on a quitclaim deed, transferred full ownership to Stone Properties LLC for $40,000. Can we stop it?" "Already done. Filed an emergency injunction this morning." Ben leaned back in his leather chair. "But that's just the beginning. We're talking about felony fraud here. Identity theft. Conspiracy to commit grand larceny. What do? Nothing. Let me handle the legal side. You just act normal. Don't let them know you're on to them." Acting normal felt like swallowing broken glass. Gordon went through the motions. Work, dinner, small talk about Jade's day. She lied smoothly, effortlessly. Told him about difficult students and new meditation techniques while planning to rob him blind. The hardest part was the physical contact. When Jade kissed him goodnight, Gordon tasted Asher's lips. When she curled against him in bed, he smelled another man's cologne on her skin. But he endured it, played the role of the clueless husband while building his case. Frank helped with the surveillance equipment. They installed hidden cameras in the living room and kitchen, audio recorders in Jade's car, software that monitored her computer activity. Everything legal, everything admissible. "She's getting sloppy," Frank observed, reviewing the week's footage. "Look at this." On screen, Jade was on the phone with someone, walking through their house like a real estate agent. "The kitchen needs updating, but the bones are good. Gordon built most of it himself. He's actually pretty talented for a knuckle dragger. We can flip it for at least $450. Gordon's fist clenched. Frank noticed. "Easy, kid. Let the anger simmer. Don't let it boil over yet. When? When we have everything, when there's no escape route." The final piece came from Yasmin Torres, Jade's former best friend. They'd had a falling out 2 years ago. Something about Jade sleeping with Yasmin's boyfriend. Yasmin worked as a nurse at Metro Health and had a reputation for keeping receipts. "I've been waiting for someone to finally see through her bullshit," Yasmin said, meeting Gordon at a diner in Lakewood. "Jade's been running this game since high school." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Bank records. Credit applications, text message screenshots. Everything from when she screwed me over." Gordon flipped through the documents. Pattern recognition was part of his job. Understanding how structures failed, where stress fractures appeared. Jade's life was full of stress fractures. "She did this before?" "3 times that I know of. Always targets guys with something to lose. Always plays the long game." Yasmin's dark eyes burned with old fury. "The boyfriend she stole from me?" "She cleaned out his savings account and left him with 50 grand in credit card debt." "Why didn't he press charges?" "Same reason most of her victims don't. Shame, embarrassment. The system makes it easier to just walk away." Gordon closed the folder. "I'm not walking away." "Good." Yasmin smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you've got. And when the time comes, I'll need you to testify." "Gladly. That bitch destroyed my life for 2 years." That night, Gordon reviewed all the evidence with Ben and Frank. Video footage of the affair, audio recordings of the conspiracy, financial documents proving a pattern of fraud, witness testimony from previous victims. "It's airtight," Ben confirmed, "but timing is everything. We hit them with everything at once, no warning, no chance to cover their tracks." "When?" Gordon asked. Frank checked his calendar. "Jade's teaching that hot yoga class Thursday nights, right? Big crowd? Every week." "Packed house." Frank grinned, the predatory smile of a cop who'd cornered his suspect. Then Thursday night it is. Gordon arrived at the zone at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes into Jade's weekly Vinyasa flow class. He carried a small projector in a gym bag, along with portable speakers and a laptop loaded with enough evidence to destroy 2 lives. Through the studio's floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see Jade in her element. 25 students followed her movements, hanging on every word as she guided them through poses with names like Warrior and Goddess. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Remember to breathe into your truth," Jade's voice carried through the glass. "Release the toxic energy that no longer serves you." Gordon entered through the main door. The receptionist, a college kid with dreadlocks and multiple piercings, looked up from his phone. "Class is in session, man. You can wait or—" "I'm expected," Gordon said, walking past him. He pushed through the studio doors just as Jade was transitioning the class into child's pose. 25 people with their foreheads pressed to their mats, vulnerable and trusting. "We have a special guest tonight," Gordon announced, setting up the projector. Jade's head snapped up. For a split second, her mask slipped. Fear flashed across her face before the fake smile returned. "Gordon? What are you doing here?" "Thought I'd share some home videos with your students. You know, give them a real look at their spiritual teacher." The first image hit the wall. Jade and Asher intertwined on the very mats these people were kneeling on. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone started crying. "Turn that off!" Jade lunged for the projector, but Gordon caught her wrist. "We're just getting started, sweetheart," the audio kicked in. Jade's voice filled the studio. "He's just a placeholder, a walking ATM machine who builds pretty driveways." Students were scrambling to their feet, grabbing their belongings. The college kid receptionist stood in the doorway, mouth hanging open, probably live streaming everything to TikTok. "You son of a bitch!" Jade screamed, clawing at Gordon's face. He let her. Let her show everyone exactly who she really was, underneath the yoga pants and inspirational quotes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gordon continued calmly, "your instructor has been stealing from her husband, forging documents, conspiring to commit real estate fraud. But hey, at least she's flexible." That's when Asher burst through the back door, face flushed with panic and rage. He'd probably been watching from his office, trying to figure out damage control. "Get the fuck out of my studio!" "Actually," Gordon pulled out a legal document, "as of this morning, this studio is under federal investigation for money laundering. Something about an LLC that doesn't actually exist." Asher's tan went pale. "You can't." "Can't what? Can't expose a fraud? Can't protect my own property?" Gordon stepped closer. "Can't ruin your little empire the same way you tried to ruin my life?" Asher swung first. A wild, desperate haymaker that Gordon saw coming from a mile away. 20 years of construction work had given Gordon quick reflexes and granite fists. He ducked, pivoted, and drove an uppercut into Asher's solar plexus. Asher folded like origami. "Assault," Gordon said conversationally as Asher wheezed on the floor, "in front of 30 witnesses, with video evidence of premeditation." He looked around the studio. Most of the students had fled, but a few remained, phones out, recording everything. This would be on Instagram within the hour. Jade was pressed against the mirror, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "Gordon, please." "We can work this out." "Work what out? The forgery? The adultery? The conspiracy to steal my house?" He shook his head. "Jade, honey, we're way past working things out." Ben Morrison appeared in the doorway with 2 uniformed police officers. Perfect timing. "Gordon Tully, we need you to come with us." Gordon nodded, playing his part. The wronged husband, driven to desperate measures by betrayal. He'd spend the night in jail, pay a fine for disturbing the peace. Meanwhile, Jade and Asher would wake up to federal charges. As the officers cuffed him, Gordon caught Jade's eye one last time. "Oh, and sweetheart, I changed the locks. Your stuff is in storage. Unit 247 on Brook Park Road. Rent's paid through the end of the month." The look on her face was worth every penny he'd spent on private investigators. Gordon's assault charges were dropped within 48 hours. Self-defense, Ben argued. Provocation in the face of devastating betrayal. The prosecutor, a middle-aged woman who'd been through her own messy divorce, seemed sympathetic. Jade and Asher weren't so lucky. "Federal fraud charges," Ben explained over coffee at Johnny's little bar. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit grand larceny." Asher's looking at 15 to 20 years. Jade could get 10. Could? She's already trying to flip, claims Asher manipulated her, that she was just following orders. Ben's expression was grim. Problem is, we have her on tape planning the whole thing. Gordon stirred his coffee, thinking. What about the house? Yours, clear title. The quitclaim deed was voided the minute we proved forgery. Ben leaned forward. But Gordon, there's something else. Something about Asher you need to know. He slid a police report across the table. This came through this morning. Our boy Asher has priors. Real estate fraud in Florida, 2019. Scammed elderly couples out of their retirement homes. Did 3 years in state prison. Gordon studied the mugshot. Same face. Different name. So this wasn't his first rodeo. Not even close. The FBI thinks he's part of a larger operation. They want to interview you, get your testimony for their investigation. What about Jade? What about her? Is she part of the larger operation? Ben was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I think she's just a useful idiot. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong man to fall in love with? Gordon felt something cold settle in his chest. Jade wasn't a master criminal. She was just a bored housewife who'd gotten in over her head with a professional con man. That almost made it worse. The divorce proceedings began the following week. Jade's lawyer, a nervous young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, filed for spousal support and half of Gordon's assets. She's entitled to compensation for 23 years of marriage, the lawyer argued during their first hearing. She's entitled to a jail cell, Ben countered. My client's wife committed multiple felonies while attempting to steal his primary residence. Any claims to marital assets are negated by her criminal conduct. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, was not impressed with Jade's sob story. Mrs. Tully, you've been charged with forging your husband's signature on legal documents. Are you claiming innocence? Jade, dressed in a conservative blue dress that made her look like a church secretary, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Your Honor, I was manipulated by Asher Stone. He told me it was just a business arrangement, that we were protecting our assets from what? From Gordon's gambling debts. The lie hung in the air like a fart in church. Gordon had never placed a bet in his life beyond the occasional lottery ticket. Ben stood up slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of Mrs. Tully's recent financial activity. The bank records painted a clear picture. Jade had been siphoning money from their joint accounts for months, transferring it to accounts controlled by Asher's shell companies. There were no gambling debts, no financial crisis that would justify her actions. Judge Hernandez reviewed the documents with growing irritation. Mrs. Tully, you've wasted this court's time with fabricated claims. Your petition for spousal support is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to reimburse Mr. Tully for any funds unlawfully transferred from joint marital accounts. Jade's face crumpled. Your Honor, I have no money. I lost my job when the yoga studio closed. I'm living in a homeless shelter. Perhaps you should have considered these consequences before committing multiple felonies. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Outside the courthouse, Jade cornered Gordon in the parking lot. Gone was the put-together yoga instructor. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Gordon, please, I know I screwed up, but I'm still your wife. We can get past this. No, Gordon said simply. We can't. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever you want. 23 years, Jade. 23 years I gave you everything I had, and you called me a placeholder. Her face twisted with anger. You were. You are. Do you think I wanted to spend my life married to a construction worker? Do you think I enjoyed pretending to be impressed by your little concrete projects? There it was. The truth, finally. Then why did you stay? Because I was comfortable. Because you were safe and stable and paid the bills while I figured out what I really wanted? Gordon nodded slowly. And what you really wanted was to steal my house and run off with a convicted felon. Jade's face went white. How did you know about Asher's record? Jade, sweetheart, I'm a lot smarter than you gave me credit for. He walked toward his truck, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse parking lot. Through his rearview mirror, he watched her crumble, finally understanding that her comfortable life was over forever. But Gordon wasn't done, not by a long shot. Gordon's plan required patience, precision, and a complete personality transformation. For 23 years, he'd been the stable, predictable husband. Now, it was time to become something else entirely. The first step was the psychological evaluation. Gordon checked himself into Cleveland Clinic's mental health unit, claiming severe depression and anxiety following his wife's betrayal. The intake counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Rebecca Santos, was sympathetic. Discovering infidelity can trigger a complete psychological break, she explained, prescribing anti-anxiety medication and scheduling twice-weekly therapy sessions. The important thing is that you're seeking help. Gordon played the role perfectly. Broken husband, shattered by betrayal, struggling to rebuild his sense of self. He attended group therapy sessions where he shared carefully crafted stories about his pain. He took his medication religiously, even though he flushed most of it down the toilet. The therapy sessions served another purpose, establishing a paper trail of mental instability. If anyone questioned his actions later, he could point to documented evidence of psychological trauma. Meanwhile, Frank was working his contacts in law enforcement. Asher's arrest had triggered a federal investigation into his real estate operations. Dozens of victims across multiple states, millions in stolen assets. The FBI was building a RICO case. They want to flip him, Frank reported over dinner at Gordon's kitchen table. Get him to testify against the bigger fish. Will he? Depends on what kind of deal they offer. But here's the thing. They're also looking at anyone who might have helped him, including your wife. Gordon set down his beer. Meaning Jade might not be as innocent as she claims. They think she helped scout targets, fed Asher information about potential victims. The possibility hadn't occurred to Gordon, but now it made perfect sense. Jade's yoga classes attracted exactly the kind of people Asher targeted. Successful professionals, empty nesters, people with assets to steal and trusting natures to exploit. How many others? Gordon asked. At least 6 in the Cleveland area. Maybe more? Gordon felt his anger transform into something colder, more focused. Jade wasn't just an adulteress who'd betrayed her marriage. She was a predator who'd helped destroy innocent people's lives. That night, he called Yasmin. I need to ask you something, he said without preamble. When Jade was dating your boyfriend, did she ever ask about his finances, his property, his investments? Long pause. Now that you mention it, yeah. She was really curious about his rental properties, asked a lot of questions about how much they were worth, whether he had partners, stuff like that. And then what happened? He lost everything. Some bad business deal, he said. Had to sell all his properties to cover debts. Another pause. Gordon, are you saying? I'm saying your ex-boyfriend was probably one of Asher's early victims, and Jade helped set him up. Yasmin's voice turned deadly quiet. That bitch. Yeah, that bitch. Gordon spent the next 2 weeks gathering information. Property records, court documents, news articles about suspicious real estate transactions. The pattern emerged clearly. Jade would identify targets through her social circle. Asher would approach them with fraudulent investment opportunities, and they'd split the proceeds. Ben filed an amended complaint in the divorce case, demanding full asset forfeiture and damages for criminal conspiracy. But Gordon had bigger plans than just winning in family court. He wanted to destroy them completely. The first shot was fired at Jade's car. Technically, it was a repossession. Gordon had discovered that Jade's BMW was leased through one of Asher's shell companies, financed with money stolen from previous victims. When the FBI froze Asher's assets, the lease went into default. Gordon bought the debt for pennies on the dollar through a collection agency, then hired a repo company to collect the car during Jade's lunch shift at the diner where she'd found work. Sir, you can't take my car, Jade screamed, as the tow truck operator loaded her BMW onto his flatbed. I need it to get to work. Take it up with the bank, lady, the repo man replied, driving away with her last symbol of the good life. The second shot targeted Asher's remaining assets. His yoga studio chain had 3 locations across Cleveland. Gordon spent weeks researching city codes, zoning laws, and health regulations. Then he started making anonymous complaints. Fire code violations at the downtown location, improper permits for the hot yoga room in Lakewood, unpaid taxes on the Westlake property. Each complaint triggered an inspection. Each inspection revealed legitimate problems. Each problem resulted in fines or temporary closures. Within a month, all 3 studios were shut down pending compliance with city regulations. Asher, facing federal fraud charges, couldn't afford the lawyers or contractors needed to fix the problems. The third shot was purely psychological. Gordon had Yasmin create a fake social media account and reach out to Asher through Facebook Messenger. She posed as a wealthy divorced woman interested in yoga and spiritual exploration. Asher took the bait immediately. "I'm actually going through a difficult time right now," he messaged her after a week of flirtation. "Some legal issues that are completely fabricated. But I believe everything happens for a reason. You know?" "I understand," Yasmin replied. "Sometimes the universe tests us to see if we're ready for greater abundance." Over the course of several conversations, Asher revealed details about his legal strategy, complained about his public defender, and made incriminating statements about his business activities with Jade. Every message was screenshot and forwarded to the FBI. The final shot came from an unexpected source, one of Asher's previous victims. Margaret Chen was a 72-year-old widow who'd lost her house to one of Asher's fraudulent investment schemes in 2019. When she saw news coverage of his arrest, she contacted Ben Morrison's office. "I want to testify," she said during a meeting at Ben's downtown office. "I want everyone to know what he did to me." Margaret's story was heartbreaking. Asher had convinced her to invest her late husband's life insurance payout in a guaranteed return real estate development. The development never existed. Margaret lost $200,000 and nearly went homeless before her children intervened. "The worst part," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face, "was how much I trusted him. He seemed so kind, so spiritual. He talked about karma and positive energy while he was stealing my life savings." Ben arranged for Margaret to meet with federal prosecutors. Her testimony would be crucial in establishing a pattern of fraud and elder abuse. But Gordon had a different idea. What if she confronted him publicly? He suggested to Ben. At his arraignment? In front of the media? "That's not how these things work, Gordon." "No, but it would be effective." Ben studied his friend's face. "You're changing, you know that? This whole situation is turning you into someone I don't recognize." Gordon considered this. Maybe I needed to change. Maybe I was too soft for too long. Or maybe you're becoming exactly what they were. Someone who hurts people to get what they want. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. Gordon was enjoying the destruction he was causing. Every setback for Jade and Asher felt like vindication, like justice finally being served. But he wasn't hurting innocent people. He was dismantling a criminal operation that had destroyed dozens of lives. If that made him ruthless, so be it. "I'm not stopping, Ben. Not until they've lost everything." Ben sighed. "Just try to remember who you used to be, okay? Don't lose yourself in this." But Gordon was beginning to think his old self had been the problem all along. Too trusting, too forgiving, too willing to believe the best in people. That version of Gordon Tully had built a good life and watched it get stolen by people who saw his decency as weakness. This new Gordon wouldn't make the same mistakes. Jade's arrest came on a Tuesday morning, just as she was leaving her studio apartment in Parma. Federal agents surrounded her beat-up Toyota Corolla, a loaner from her sister, and pulled her out in handcuffs while her neighbors watched from their windows. Gordon wasn't there to see it, but Frank had a contact in the U.S. Marshal's office who provided details. "Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and RICO violations," Frank reported over coffee. "They're treating her as part of Asher's criminal enterprise. How much time is she looking at? 25 to life if they can make the RICO charges stick. Minimum 15 on the fraud counts." Gordon felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no sense of justice served. Just emptiness where his marriage used to be. The media coverage was brutal. Local news stations ran segments about the yoga studio scam, featuring Jade's mugshot and security footage from the studio confrontation. Social media lit up with commentary from former students and victims. "She taught my daughter's yoga class," one woman posted on Facebook. "I trusted her with my child while she was stealing from families just like mine." "Always knew something was off about her," another comment read. "Too fake, too perfect." Real spiritual teachers don't drive BMWs. Gordon watched it all unfold from his kitchen table, drinking coffee and reading construction blueprints for his next project. He'd taken a contract to build a medical office complex in Strongsville. Clean work, honest work, the kind of thing he'd been doing his whole life while his wife plotted to destroy him. The doorbell rang at 3 p.m. Gordon opened it to find Yasmin Torres standing on his porch, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing a satisfied smile. "Thought we should celebrate," she said, walking into his house without invitation. "Celebrate what?" "Justice, Gordon." "Sweet, beautiful justice." She set the champagne on his kitchen counter and turned to face him. "Do you know what Jade said when they arrested her?" Gordon waited. "She said it was all your fault. That you drove her to it with your emotional neglect and working-class limitations." Yasmin laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Even now, even facing 25 years in prison, she can't take responsibility for her own choices." "Sounds about right." Yasmin studied his face. "You don't seem happy. Should I be?" "Hell yes. You won, Gordon. You destroyed the people who tried to destroy you. That's more than most people ever get." Gordon poured himself another cup of coffee, not offering any to Yasmin. "What do you want?" "Want? You didn't come here just to celebrate." "What do you want?" Yasmin's smile faltered slightly. "I was thinking, now that this is all over, maybe we could, I don't know, get to know each other better." There it was. Gordon had been expecting this since the day Yasmin offered to help him. She hadn't been motivated by justice or friendship. She'd been positioning herself as Jade's replacement. "No," Gordon said simply. "No? I'm not looking for another relationship, Yasmin. Not with you. Not with anyone." Her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you." "But you helped me destroy my wife's life for your own reasons, not out of the goodness of your heart. That makes you useful, not trustworthy." "You son of a bitch," Yasmin hissed. "I did everything you asked. I risked my job, my reputation, and I'm grateful, but that doesn't mean I owe you anything beyond gratitude." Yasmin grabbed her champagne bottle and stormed toward the door. "You deserve to be alone, Gordon. You deserve exactly what you got." After she left, Gordon sat in his empty house and considered her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe he did deserve to be alone. Maybe his transformation from betrayed husband to calculating destroyer had burned away everything that made him worth loving. His phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Asher pleaded guilty to federal charges, 47 counts. "Sentencing hearing next month." Gordon typed back, "What about Jade?" "Still fighting it. Public defender thinks he can get the RICO charges dropped if she cooperates." "Will she?" "Probably. She's looking at hard time either way, but cooperation might cut 10 years off her sentence." Gordon set the phone aside and walked through his house, the house Jade had tried to steal, the house he'd fought to keep. Every room held memories of their life together. The kitchen, where she'd made coffee every morning for 23 years. The living room, where they'd watched movies and argued about money and made plans for a future that would never come. He could sell it, start over somewhere else. But this house was his victory, his proof that good could triumph over evil if you were willing to fight dirty enough. The problem was, he wasn't sure he was still good. Gordon walked to his basement workshop, where he kept his tools and blueprints. On the workbench sat a framed photo from their wedding day. Him in a rented tux, Jade in white lace, both of them young and hopeful and stupidly in love. He'd kept it there through the divorce, through the arrests, through everything. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of what naivety had cost him. Now he picked up the frame and looked at the couple in the picture. Strangers, really. People he used to be and could never be again. Gordon opened the frame, removed the photo, and fed it into his paper shredder. The machine chewed up their smiling faces with mechanical efficiency. Then he picked up his phone and called his foreman. "Martinez? It's Gordon. How's the Strongsville project coming?" "Good, boss. Foundations poured, concrete's curing. We should be ready for framing next week." "Good, listen, I'm thinking about expanding. Taking on bigger projects, maybe commercial development. You interested in running a bigger crew?" "Hell yes, boss." "What you got in mind?" Gordon looked around his workshop, at the tools that had built his life and the empty spaces where his marriage used to be. "I'll let you know. But Martinez, from now on, we do everything in writing. Contracts, agreements, handshake deals, everything gets documented. No exceptions." "You got it, boss." Gordon hung up and walked back upstairs. Tomorrow he'd start building something new. But tonight, he had one more piece of business to finish. The sentencing hearing took place on a gray November morning in downtown Cleveland's federal courthouse. Gordon sat in the gallery, wearing his best suit and a poker face that revealed nothing. Jade was led in wearing Orange County jail scrubs, her hair lank and unwashed. 20 pounds thinner than when he'd last seen her. She looked like what she was, a convicted felon facing decades in prison. Asher had been sentenced the week before. 47 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 20. At 45, he'd die behind bars. The judge had been particularly harsh, citing the predatory nature of his crimes and his complete lack of remorse. Now it was Jade's turn. "Your Honor," her public defender began, "my client was manipulated by a master criminal. She was emotionally vulnerable, isolated from her support system, and psychologically abused by Asher Stone." Judge Hernandez, the same judge who'd handled their divorce, looked unimpressed. "Counselor, your client actively participated in identifying and targeting victims. She wasn't a puppet, she was a partner." The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Sarah Chen, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, Jade Tully helped destroy the lives of at least 8 families. She used her position as a yoga instructor to gain victims' trust, then fed their personal information to her co-conspirator. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated criminal enterprise." Gordon watched Jade's face as the prosecutor spoke. No tears, no remorse, just sullen resentment. Even now, facing life in prison, she couldn't accept responsibility for her choices. "Mrs. Tully," Judge Hernandez said, "do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Jade stood slowly, her lawyer whispering something in her ear. For a moment, Gordon thought she might actually apologize, might finally show some hint of the woman he'd once loved. Instead, she turned and looked directly at him. "This is all his fault," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "Gordon Tully destroyed my life out of petty revenge. He couldn't accept that I'd found someone better than him, so he conspired to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel for order. "Mrs. Tully, you were convicted by a jury of your peers based on overwhelming evidence of your guilt. Your ex-husband had nothing to do with—" "He set me up!" Jade shouted, straining against her shackles. "He planted evidence, manipulated witnesses, bribed officials. He's the real criminal." 2 bailiffs moved toward her, but Judge Hernandez held up a hand. "Mrs. Tully, you have shown no remorse for your crimes and no acceptance of responsibility for your actions. Your attempts to blame others for your criminal choices demonstrate a fundamental lack of character that makes you a continuing danger to society." The judge consulted her notes. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. On the charge of money laundering, 10 years to run concurrently. On the charge of identity theft, 5 years to run concurrently. Total sentence, 15 years, with eligibility for parole after 12 years served." Jade collapsed into her chair as if she'd been shot. 15 years. She'd be 53 when she got out, assuming she qualified for early release. Her life as she'd known it was over. Gordon felt satisfied. Not happy, not vindicated, just satisfied that justice had been served. The woman who'd called him a placeholder was now truly powerless, reduced to a number in the federal prison system. As they led Jade away, she turned one last time to look at Gordon. Her eyes held pure hatred, the kind of burning resentment that could consume a person from the inside. "I'll get out," she mouthed silently. "And when I do, I'll destroy you." Gordon smiled and gave her a small wave goodbye. After the hearing, Gordon drove to Frank's house in Parma Heights. His uncle was in the backyard, grilling burgers and drinking beer despite the November chill. "How'd it go?" Frank asked, not looking up from the grill. 15 years. "Good. She'll serve 10, maybe 12 with good behavior?" Frank flipped a burger, the meat sizzling against the cold air. "You feel better now?" Gordon considered the question. "I feel finished. Finished. Like I completed something, built something that needed building." Frank studied his nephew's face. "And what did you build, exactly?" "Justice, I guess. Or revenge. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe they are." Frank handed Gordon a beer. "So what now?" "Now I build something else." 3 weeks later, Gordon closed on a property in Akron, a defunct manufacturing plant that had been abandoned since the recession. 30 acres of industrial space with solid bones and unlimited potential. The asking price was a fraction of what the land was worth, but the previous owner was desperate to sell. Gordon had plans for the space, big plans, He hired Martinez as his project manager and assembled a crew of the best tradesmen in Cleveland. Electricians, plumbers, concrete specialists, steel workers, all of them guys who'd worked with Gordon for years and trusted his vision. "What are we building, boss?" Martinez asked, studying the preliminary blueprints. "The future," Gordon replied. "Mixed-use development, residential lofts, commercial space, light manufacturing, everything this area needs to come back to life." It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for a small construction company. But Gordon had advantages now that he'd never had before. The insurance settlement from Jade's fraud had netted him $2 million. The sale of their house had added another $400,000. And his reputation as the guy who'd taken down a criminal conspiracy had opened doors throughout the business community. Banks that had never given him a second look were now eager to finance his projects. City officials who'd treated him like just another contractor now returned his calls promptly. Success bred success, and Gordon was finally truly successful. But success came with a price. Gordon's new apartment was a sterile high-rise in downtown Cleveland, all glass and steel and designer furniture. It was nothing like the house he'd shared with Jade, which was exactly the point. No memories, no ghosts, no reminders of who he used to be. He worked 16-hour days, supervising construction and meeting with investors and planning his next acquisition. The Akron project was just the beginning. Gordon had identified 6 more properties throughout Ohio: abandoned factories, closed shopping centers, failed housing developments. All of them available for pennies on the dollar, all of them ripe for redevelopment by someone with vision and capital. "You're becoming quite the real estate mogul," Ben observed over dinner at an upscale steakhouse in Beechwood. Jade would be proud. The comment hit harder than Ben probably intended. Gordon set down his whiskey and considered his friend's words. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing malicious. Just an observation that you're playing the same game she was. Buying low, selling high, maximizing profit. The difference is I'm not stealing from people." "No, you're not. But you're also not the same guy I've known for 30 years. Ben was right, and they both knew it. The old Gordon Tully had been content with small jobs and steady income. He'd cared more about craftsmanship than profit margins, more about building things that lasted than building wealth. This new Gordon was different, harder, more calculating, more willing to exploit opportunities and manipulate situations to his advantage. "Maybe the old Gordon was naive," Gordon said finally. "Maybe, or maybe he was decent." They finished dinner in uncomfortable silence. That night, Gordon stood on his apartment balcony, looking out over downtown Cleveland. 30 floors below, the city sprawled in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, building their dreams, trusting in systems and institutions and each other. From this height, they looked like ants. Predictable, vulnerable, easily manipulated if you understood their patterns. Gordon's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. We should meet. A friend." He deleted the message without responding. In his new life, Gordon didn't have friends. He had employees, business partners, and useful contacts. Friendship required trust, and Gordon had learned that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. 6 months later, Gordon's company, Tully Development, had grown to 40 employees and contracts worth $50 million. The Akron project was ahead of schedule and under budget. Investors were lining up to fund his next acquisitions. Gordon had become exactly what Jade had always wanted him to be: wealthy, powerful, successful. The irony wasn't lost on him. But success came with new challenges: competitors who tried to undercut his bids, city officials who demanded under-the-table payments for permits, union bosses who threatened work stoppages unless their demands were met. Gordon handled each challenge with the same cold efficiency he'd used to destroy his wife's life. Competitors found their projects mysteriously delayed by zoning issues. Corrupt officials discovered their illegal activities had been reported to the FBI. Union bosses learned that their members could be easily replaced by non-union workers willing to work for less. "You're making enemies," Martinez warned during a site visit in Youngstown. "People are starting to talk. Let them talk. Boss, I'm serious. Some of these guys, they don't play by the same rules we do." Gordon looked around the construction site. His construction site, built with his money, employing his workers, creating value where there had been none before. "Martinez, I appreciate your concern, but I didn't get where I am by worrying about other people's feelings. Where you are, "Boss, where exactly are you?" It was a good question. Gordon owned properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He employed hundreds of people. He had influence with politicians and bankers and media figures throughout Ohio. But he lived alone in a sterile apartment, worked 18 hours a day, and trusted no one completely. "I'm where I need to be," Gordon said finally. That night, as Gordon reviewed financial reports in his home office, he found himself thinking about Jade. She was 3 years into her sentence at Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia. According to the Bureau of Prisons website, she was eligible for release in 2034, assuming good behavior. She'd be 51 years old, still young enough to start over if she'd learned anything from her experience. But Gordon doubted she'd learned anything except how to hate him more efficiently. His computer chimed with an email notification. The sender was listed as j.tully with a prison email address. Gordon hesitated for a moment, then clicked open the message. "Gordon, I know you're reading this. I know you've been checking on me, tracking my status, making sure I'm still locked up. You think you won, but you didn't. You just delayed the inevitable. I'll get out eventually, and when I do, I'll take everything you've built and burn it to the ground. You taught me how to be ruthless. Congratulations. Jade." Gordon read the message twice, then forwarded it to Ben with a note. "FYI, might want to document this in case she escalates." Then he deleted the email and went back to his financial reports. Jade was right about one thing. Gordon had taught her how to be ruthless, but she'd been an excellent student long before they met. He'd just given her better targets. And if she wanted to come after him when she got out, well, Gordon would be ready. He'd spent the last 3 years building something bigger than a marriage, bigger than a house, bigger than a small construction company. He'd built an empire, and empires were designed to withstand sieges. Gordon's phone rang at midnight. The caller ID showed Martinez's number. "Boss, we got a problem at the Akron site." "What kind of problem?" "Fire. Someone torched the main building." "Cops and fire department are here now." Gordon was already reaching for his clothes. "Anyone hurt?" "No, but boss, this wasn't an accident. They left a message." "What kind of message?" "Spray painted on the security trailer. Says, pay your debts or pay the price." Gordon hung up and drove through the night to Akron, his mind racing through possibilities. He didn't owe money to anyone. His business was profitable. His loans were current. His taxes were paid. Which meant this was about something else entirely. The fire had gutted the main residential building, 3 months of work reduced to charred timber and twisted steel. The loss would set the project back 6 months and cost him nearly $2 million in materials and labor. "Any witnesses?" Gordon asked the fire chief. "None that are talking." "But we found this in the parking lot." The chief handed Gordon a business card. No name, no address, just a phone number and a simple message. "Call when you're ready to negotiate." Gordon pocketed the card and surveyed the damage. Someone was sending him a message, and the message was clear. No matter how successful he became, there would always be people willing to tear down what he'd built. The old Gordon might have been intimidated, might have called the police, hired security, maybe even paid whatever these people wanted. But the old Gordon was dead, burned away in the flames of his marriage just as surely as this building had been burned away tonight. This Gordon, the one who destroyed his wife's life and built an empire from the ashes, this Gordon had learned that the only way to deal with bullies was to become something they feared more than they feared losing their lives. Gordon pulled out his phone and dialed the number on the business card. "I was wondering when you'd call," a gravelly voice answered. "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks you've forgotten where you came from, Gordon. Someone who thinks you need a reminder about respecting your betters." "I don't have betters," the voice laughed. "Everyone has betters, tough guy, even you. The question is whether you learn that lesson the easy way or the hard way. What do you want? Partnership. You've got contracts, connections, legitimate businesses. I've got resources, muscle, ways of solving problems that don't involve courts and lawyers." Gordon understood now. This wasn't about money or revenge. This was about recruitment. Someone had been watching his transformation from blue-collar foreman to ruthless developer and decided he'd make a useful ally. Not interested? That's unfortunate, because this was the easy way. The line went dead. Gordon stood in the ruins of his building and smiled for the first time in months. Someone was threatening him. Someone thought they could intimidate him into partnership or submission. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. The next morning, Gordon called a meeting with his core team: Martinez, Ben, Frank, and a new addition, David Kim, a former Army Ranger who now ran a private security firm. "We're at war," Gordon announced without preamble. "Someone burned down our Akron site and wants to extort partnership fees." "You know who?" Kim asked. "Not yet, but I will." Gordon outlined his plan. It was comprehensive, ruthless, and probably illegal in several states. But it would solve the problem permanently. "Gordon?" Ben interrupted. "What you're describing, it's basically organized crime." "No," Gordon corrected. "Organized crime is what they're doing. What I'm describing is self-defense." Ben shook his head. "I can't be part of this. I won't be part of this." "Then you're out." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ben had been Gordon's friend for 30 years, his lawyer for 10, his confidant through the darkest period of his life. But friendship was a luxury Gordon could no longer afford. "Gordon," Ben said quietly, "you're not the man I used to know." "No," Gordon agreed, "I'm not. The man you used to know got betrayed, robbed, and humiliated by people who mistook his decency for weakness. This man doesn't make those mistakes." Ben packed up his briefcase and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "Just remember, when you become the monster to fight the monsters, you're still a monster." After Ben left, Gordon continued the briefing. Martinez would coordinate construction security. Frank would investigate the threats using his police contacts. Kim would handle direct action, if necessary. "What about legal counsel?" Martinez asked. "I'll find new lawyers, better lawyers. Lawyers who understand that sometimes you have to break rules to enforce them." Within a week, Gordon had his answers. The threats were coming from the Kozlov family, a Russian organized crime group that controlled construction unions and development projects throughout northeastern Ohio. They'd been watching Gordon's expansion and decided he needed to pay tribute or face consequences. Viktor Kozlov was the current head of the family, a third-generation American who'd inherited his grandfather's criminal empire and modernized it for the 21st century. Legitimate businesses mixed with illegal activities, violence tempered by political connections, and community involvement. He was exactly the kind of predator Gordon had learned to recognize and destroy. The first strike was financial. Gordon's new legal team, a white shoe firm with federal prosecutors on retainer, filed RICO complaints against 17 Kozlov-controlled businesses. Simultaneously, IRS agents began auditing Kozlov properties for tax violations. The second strike was operational. Kim's security teams began providing protective services to Kozlov job sites, documenting code violations and safety infractions that were then reported to OSHA and local building inspectors. The third strike was personal. Frank's police contacts began investigating Kozlov family members for everything from tax evasion to domestic violence. Traffic stops led to drug possession charges. Routine inspections revealed immigration violations. Within 2 months, the Kozlov organization was fighting legal battles on 15 different fronts. Their lawyers were overwhelmed. Their businesses were paralyzed by investigations, and their family members were facing arrest. Viktor Kozlov requested a meeting. They met at a construction site in downtown Cleveland, neutral ground where both sides could arrive with security and leave without incident. Gordon brought Kim and 2 other former military contractors. Kozlov brought his brother and a mountain of muscle who looked like he bench-pressed Buicks for fun. "You're a persistent man, Mr. Tully," Kozlov said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs posted throughout the site. "I'm a thorough man." "Thorough. Yes, that's a good word for it." Kozlov took a long drag. "My lawyers tell me you've cost us approximately $4 million in the last 60 days. And that's just the beginning." Kozlov smiled. "I like you. You remind me of my grandfather. Same coldness, same calculation. Your grandfather would have recognized that I'm not someone you extort. I'm someone you avoid, or someone you eliminate." The words hung in the air like smoke from Kozlov's cigarette. Both security teams tensed, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. "You could try," Gordon said calmly, "but I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, my lawyers have instructions to release everything we've collected about your organization to federal prosecutors. Evidence of racketeering, money laundering, political corruption. Enough to put your entire family away for life." Kozlov studied Gordon's face, looking for signs of bluff or weakness. He found neither. What do you want? I want you to leave me alone. I want you to abandon any claims on my projects or my territory. And I want compensation for the Akron fire, $4 million, paid into an escrow account controlled by my lawyers. And in exchange, I stop destroying your organization. You get to rebuild what's left and pretend this never happened. Kozlov flicked his cigarette onto the concrete floor and ground it under his heel. You've got balls, Tully, I'll give you that. I've got more than balls. I've got resources, connections, and the absolute certainty that I'm right. Righteous anger is a powerful thing, Kozlov agreed, but it can also be dangerous. Sometimes righteous men become the very thing they're fighting against. Gordon looked around the construction site, steel beams reaching toward the sky, concrete foundations poured solid and true, the bones of something that would last for generations. Maybe, but at least I'll be the thing that wins. The payment arrived in Gordon's escrow account 3 days later. $4 million in certified funds, along with a signed agreement that the Kozlov organization would cease all activities in Gordon's territories. It was unconditional surrender disguised as a business arrangement. That night, Gordon stood on his balcony overlooking downtown Cleveland and realized he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sense of justice served. He'd won, again, completely and utterly. But winning had become as empty as losing once was painful. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Impressive work with the Russians, we should talk. A friend." This time, Gordon didn't delete the message. Instead, he typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who appreciates your methods, someone with bigger problems that require your particular skill set." Gordon stared at the message for a long time. 3 years ago, he'd been a simple construction foreman whose biggest concern was whether the concrete would cure properly in cold weather. Now, he was something else entirely. Something harder, colder, more effective. Something dangerous. "Oh, what kind of problems?" he typed. "The kind that requires someone who understands that rules are just suggestions and that sometimes justice has to be taken rather than given." Gordon looked out over the city lights, each one representing someone living their life, trusting in systems and institutions to protect them from predators. Most of those people would never understand that predators could only be stopped by other predators, that sometimes you had to become the monster to defeat the monsters. But Gordon understood, and apparently, other people had noticed. "I'm listening," he typed. The response came with an address and a time. "Tomorrow, 8 p.m., come alone." Gordon set the phone aside and poured himself a whiskey. Tomorrow, he'd find out what came after winning. Tonight, he'd drink to the death of Gordon Tully, faithful husband and honest contractor. That man was gone forever, burned away in the flames of betrayal and resurrection. What remained was something new, something built from ash and concrete and the absolute certainty that in a world full of predators, the only safety came from being the apex predator. Gordon raised his glass to the city below and smiled. "Now we build from ash."